All right, this is we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. We're gonna have people getting logged in. We're gonna make sure that we have the audio functioning here. And if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for people that are watching it live. We'll go ahead and start collecting questions. This will be streamed afterwards on the Steinberg Software YouTube channel. So if you you could go back and rewatch it at that point. We'll have some people starting to get logged in here. I'll just go ahead and start collecting some topics and questions. All right. So, and also if you're watching this offline, it usually takes us a couple minutes to collect questions and go through the introductions. All right, glad to see Rich is online from the UK. So we'll usually get started maybe 5 or 10 minutes. So if you wanted to fast forward, if you're watching it. Also, we generally have some people that are really kind enough to index the topics that we cover. It is kind of dynamic Q&A. So if people are watching and want to make notations about what topics and what time it was covered, that's always a great reference so that people could jump to a particular topic. So we'll do that. And again, if you have questions, you could just kind of enter them in the comments field. We had people that had sent questions in advance. So we'll answer those and some other questions that kind of came across I thought would be interesting that people had sent me throughout the month. So we'll go ahead and get some more people who are getting logged in. All right. So we'll get started here again in a couple minutes, and we'll just make sure you guys can hear me okay. I'm going to play just a little bit of audio. All right, we'll just get some audio going. And we'll just... All right, so we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. All right, good to see Mark from Illinois, Rashid from Senegal. That's great to see. All right, so we're getting more people logged in. So once again, in the future, all right, so we have Fabio from Italy. I believe you're on the last one, if I'm not mistaken. So again, this is kind of a free-form Q&A. We had people that had submitted questions, and if you want to send questions in advance, you could email them at ClubCubase at Gmail or ClubCubase at Steinberg.net. So once again, you get at ClubCubase at Steinberg.net for topics that you want covered. All right, so we see Sam from Lebanon. All right, it's great. All right, and we'll just and we'll get started here in a couple minutes. People are getting logged in. Have some questions that were sent in advance. And if you have questions for those that are logging in, watching it live, you could just kind of enter it in the comments field. And, if you're just kind of logging in, if you wanted to, just take a quick minute and introduce yourself in the comments field. All right, so Cisco from Tanzania. I'm probably saying that incorrectly. Or Tanzania. Excuse my ignorance. All right, so some more people logging in. All right. Tolis from Greece. All right, it's great to see you. Mike from New York. All right. All right, so once again, if you have questions, go ahead and feel free to enter them in the comments field. All right, so we had a question from Nikolai about Arturia Spark. Okay, so we'll go over some external controllers. I don't have the Arturia controller, but I'll put that in the list. We'll copy it. All right, so we have Boris from Germany. All right, just gonna do some note taking here. Okay, so we're seeing some more questions coming in. All right, so we have Ravi from India. All right, then Buddy from Ohio. All right, David from LA. All right, so we're still getting people logged in. All right, so we have someone, it's Helmut from Austria. Okay, so I'm just copying some of the questions that are coming in so we can go through those. All right. So now we'll just kind of go here. And we had some interesting questions kind of sent in, so we'll be going over those. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Okay. All right, so we got some render in place. I see a question about pitch bend on automation. Is that possible? So you just want to use pitch bend as a controller, so we can think we get that set up. Just copying some notes here for different questions. Okay, some render in place with Groove Agent 4 for mono. All right, so a question on macros. All right, just copying some of the questions that are coming in live here. Okay, just making some housekeeping notes. We'll get started here just pretty soon. All right, and also just for our own curiosity, if you get a chance to kind of indicate how you heard about the Hangout, so we know kind of what methods are working or not working, that would be helpful. All right, so see multi-track warp, see that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a lot of interesting topics to go over. So let's just go ahead and some that were sent in earlier today. Okay, so seeing some people indicate how they heard about it. So if you just want to just type a little note, that'd be helpful for us. So someone had written, is it possible for us to make our own .midi loop files for use with the media bay? Yes. So a MIDI loop is basically just kind of, you can think of it as a quick sketch of an idea. So if I wanted to come here, let's say I'll just do a new project. And MIDI loops are created from an instrument track. So that's one thing to be aware of. So it's not a normal MIDI track. So if I wanted to add a track instrument here, let's say I'll just do something like retro log. All right. So let's say I'll just open up retro log, and as we do this, we'll just kind of pick just a random preset here. I'll pick something a little less eerie. All right, so let's say now if I just wanted to go ahead and record a part. Now what we could do at this point is we have this MIDI part that's automatically kind of saved directly with the instrument sound going out to the retro log with that. So if I wanted to come here, what I could do now is I'm just going to trim this a little bit here. And what I want to do is to just say, okay, we're going to take that file and we go to File and we'll go to Export. And then we see that the MIDI loop option is active. So I'm going to export my MIDI loop and we're just going to call it, say, April Hangout bass. So now at this point, we can see we're going to have our bass part there. Let's say I just completely remove this selected track. Now at this point, I could go to my media bay, and then you'll see kind of some different functions here. So one of the things that you could do is if you want to just kind of search, you could just when you come here, you'll have an option in 8.5 where you could see more. So here, if you wanted to see, different track presets or MIDI loops, you can now just kind of come and see some of the different options that are available. So if I wanted to even just see my loops and samples, here at this point I could just kind of type in and say, okay, I'm looking. We could show all the items, and if I wanted to just go say April, we can see our April Hangout bass. So this is our loop that we just created. So if I double click, it's now going to automatically load up that particular instrument. We could audition to play it. and then you could just simply have that particular MIDI loop. So it's a really good thing for kind of sketching out different ideas, so that, you know, if you wanted to just kind of be able to archive and save different you know, musical ideas or motifs, if you will, you can just simply kind of save it as a MIDI loop and have access to that. And then once you do that, if you needed to just copy it to a completely different instrument, you could just kind of take that part, and if you wanted to copy it, you could do that. But that will store the sound that you kind of played the part in, that you played the part with, and that part, and then you could just import that freely into any other project. All right, so let's go through one of your questions was sent in. There's a second part to that question. Okay, I'd also like to know what's possible with making our own pattern bank files. So a pattern bank is basically the presets for a MIDI part from one of the MIDI effects, the Beat Designer plugin. So if I wanted to come here, let me just load up a quick, we'll say just a quick track instrument here for Groove Agent SE, and this comes with every copy of Cubase. So, and I'll just go ahead, I'll right click here, we'll just load up a kit with some patterns. So let's just say I want it to be, we'll just do some part here. Let me just find a Beat Agent kit here. Say, okay. So now that I have different sounds loaded up here, what you could do is, if you wanted to program a beat, is as you come over here, we could say, let's go to our MIDI inserts, and then we could open up Beat Designer. Now what this is going to allow you to do, if you haven't really kind of played around with it, is as we just kind of, we could just kind of play along here. I'll just make a horrific beat. If you want to kind of change the velocity. So now if I wanted to save this particular pattern for some reason, it's a very terrible beat, what I could do now is just go to the preset management, and then we could choose save preset, and we'll just call this Bad April Beat. And then you could just access, when you go to load up different patterns, you could just go to load your presets, and you can see your my Bad April beat there. But now also this could show up directly within the media bay as well. So if I just wanted to come here, this now shows up as a pattern bank. So if I just wanted to double click, we could actually just add a MIDI track with that pattern automatically generated, and then you could play it back through any other device. So pattern bank is going to be set up as kind of preset patterns for the Beat Agent MIDI plugin. And to access the MIDI plugin, again, you could just simply go to your MIDI inserts or to your MIDI send. So if you want to kind of, you know, have an easy way of kind of coming up with a beat that's pretty graphic, you could do this, and you could add different flams, adjust the velocity, and kind of have this actually synchronize with this. Now, what else is kind of interesting is you could actually just come here and say you wanted to insert the pattern at the left locator, and you could actually just take that pattern directly from the Beat Agent onto your actual project window timeline as well. So, it's a really there's a lot of great tools within Beat Designer for programming beats. You could come here and say, okay, I didn't like this. I just wanted to, shift the patterns to the right. Or if I wanted to shift the patterns to the left, you can come here. So there's a lot of kind of interesting variations that you could do and actually just trigger these different patterns from a MIDI note here to play back different MIDI patterns as you want, plus independent swing. So a lot of great things for if you haven't explored this part of the program that are really handy for that. All right, so we'll move on. I see a question. Can I ask Steinberg to make the transport dockable in a future update? So a lot of people aren't aware, the transport is here. And I like having the ability to have it float around, but you can't have a lot of the transport controls directly here in the toolbar. So I've asked recently if we could have like rewind and fast forward as opposed to cycle into next marker. But for a lot of the main transport functions, you could access it directly here and have that docked within the toolbar. But I'll reiterate your request once again about being able to dock the transport. All right, so we're going to all right. So looking through a couple of your questions are coming in. Let me just okay. It says, how do you keep key switch notes? This is one that just kind of came in from Mark Davenport. How do you keep key switch notes from appearing in the score layout when using rack instruments that use key switches for different articulations? So it's a really good question, Mark. And one of the things that we could do, I'm just going to load up kind of a project that has some key switches within the project here. It's kind of set up. Just quickly find a piece. So one of the things that gets to be problematic when working with a lot of different sample libraries is being able to actually find the notes that are designed to switch the instrument sounds. Here we go. This is the piece. And what is actually intended as a musical note. And we could do this from, it doesn't really matter if it's part of a MIDI track or part of an instrument track. So using track instruments. So now one of the things that's really powerful with Cubase and why it's so popular amongst many composers, when dealing with different libraries that have different levels of articulation, we have, if we come over here, we have something called note expression, but we have the VST expression maps, and this was introduced in Cubase 5. So when I come here, we get, a lot of times what you have is, let's say on a violin part, we have notes that are out of the range of the instrument that tell it to switch between the different articulation. So whether it's going to play back a whole tone trill, a half tone trill, or spiccato, tremolo, pizz, legato, etc. So, but often when you go to actually, print out the part, what people do is they record this low note that isn't part of the music, and that actually gets kind of translated into the score editor, giving you unintended notes. So as part of the expression map setup, and you can actually download lots of different expression maps for different instruments. This is for the Halion Symphonic Orchestra, kind of the add-on sound set you can get with Cubase. But so in this one, I can see we have, looks like about 10 or 12 different articulations for violin 1. Now, how this works is as you record, instead of being recorded strictly as a violin part here with notes below that are doing key switches, what this actually does is those notes that have been defined in the expression map, and again, a lot of these have been done that you could just simply download. These will all show up in the articulation lane. So as we look at our different articulations, we could choose our controller lane here to see articulations and dynamics. So if I wanted to kind of play this, I could now, instead of, if I wanted to listen to the violin here, we'll just play this. So I have it set to legato. But let's say those notes there, the probably 30-second notes at this rhythm, at this tempo, I want it to be more spiccato. So you could actually just come here and switch the articulation to say, okay, let's make this spiccato for these notes. And then back to legato. For the long note, we'll just start it right there. So now what it's going to do is do the key switch. So let's say these notes, I want it to be pitch staccato. So I could select those notes. And as you record the key switches in real time, they are automatically kind of sent out directly to the mapping here as well. So say, okay, let's make this pizzicato, and you could actually see the name just kind of show up right here. And then back to legato. So if we wanted to listen to this phrase, and this is how you get very kind of realistic string articulations and, or, you know, emulating acoustic instruments. Now, the best part of this is this also carries over directly into the notation editor. So if I wanted to look at this part in my notation editor, it's actually written in all of the different notes. And we don't see the super low notes here that we're doing the key switches. We actually just see the articulations handled here. So this way we can actually see the actual articulations here without having it treated solely as a MIDI note that has to be kind of erased, copied, so that you could print out parts. So explore, mark just some time using the note expressions. It's so useful, and you know, for dealing with articulations, really solves a big problem that composers run into. Okay, so just see a question about Halion Sonic SE. I'm just going to read the question. When working with Halion Sonic SE with multi-instruments loaded, can I add effects, EQ, compression to each instrument individually? The channel strip affects all the instruments loaded in the Halion Sonic SE. So I'm going to go ahead and just load up an instance of Halion Sonic SE. And we can do this as a rack or a track instrument, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go to my synth here and say, okay, we go to the Halion Sonic SE. And as we look at this, okay, we're going to create a new track here. So Halion Sonic SE, one of the things that's really, you know, it's kind of a workhorse synth that's included. And a lot of times you may see that it's only going to, you know, like a lot of people see, okay, I have my mixer here, and I could adjust, and you have, you know, like your own, you know, you have dedicated effects section. It's very flexible. So you have 4 different aux sends where you could have 4 effects stacked together. And then, you know, so you could have, you know, more send, pan control. So this all looks very handy, but if you wanted to just, you know, go directly, you know, to have more flexibility with treating it with the channel strip, you need to just simply come here, and you have 16 outputs. So if you just look at the main Halion Sonic page, and I think by default you'll see the edit tab activated, but if you go to mix, now sometimes by default some instruments in the past were guilty, especially like our Halion 3, of loading up a lot of, potential outputs. So I think our Hallion 3 sampler at one point had 64 mono outs, 64 stereo outs, and sometimes you would load up that instrument and your mixer would just kind of grow to be completely out of control with a bunch of channels that weren't necessarily being used. So, you open up the instrument and you have 200 outputs. So one of the keys is, if you look at from the instrument rack here, you can now choose your different instrument outputs directly here. So if you wanted to just say, I want to activate my 16 stereo outputs, or however many outputs are directly in your instrument, then you can discretely route all these channels to different outputs that will then show up within your VST mixer here. And then once you have your mixer here at this point, you could then run it through all the EQs and channel strips and all of the normal processing that you would be able to access directly there. So with the Hallion Sonic SE, if you wanted to access all of your effects, make sure first that you have all of your outputs. Now, it used to be prior to version 7, or prior to version 7.5, I believe, that the instrument tracks could only be outputted to stereo. So if we add an instrument track going to Hallion Sonic SE, in version 7 and before, you'd be limited to just having that one stereo output, and you'd be stuck kind of mixing all internally. But since 7.5, you could actually, once you add an instrument track, if you go just to the right here, you could now activate all the multi outputs right there. So excuse me. So just make sure that you have all the outputs activated first, and then you can, within the Hallion Sonic SE, just choose, or within Hallion Sonic, you could just choose your multiple outputs on the far right hand side, and you should be all set to have the full plethora of processing capabilities of the Cubase mixer. All right, so we see, all right, so I'm just kind of circling back, going through a couple of questions that are coming in. So see a quick question: is it possible to split a stereo track into mono, for example, bass lines from Hallion? So we'll just do this really quick. So let's say if I have, I'll just do a new project here. All right, and let me just kind of pop over here to, I think probably has some different drum loops. All right, so let's say we have a drum loop here, or any stereo audio file, and we want this to just, so if we wanted that to split, this isn't a great solution, but what you can do is, if you select a part, hit the letter P, that will put the left and right locators around the event, and then what you could do is go to export, and then if you go to your audio mixdown, you have choices here where you could split channels, and then you could just say you want to insert it into an audio track, and at that point you just say export. Oh, sorry, I just had my, let me just exile WaveLab here real quick. Give me just 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, so I had a post process where you can now go directly to WaveLab, but if I set it up correctly myself, we can now just simply just say export, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get the left and right channels split to mono. Now, if you wanted to sum them, all you'd have to do when you go to your export audio mix down is to just simply, you can say a mono down mix, like for a bass part, as you mentioned. So that might be a good choice. So there really isn't such a really super slick way. There could be, maybe in the future we'll see some work in that part of the program to make it a little easier. But you could just simply, at that point, just run that and do a mix down process for that. Okay, so there's a question about, is there a way to freeze multiple tracks, instrument, MIDI, or audio at once, maybe a macro or some other neat trick? There isn't. A freeze is going to be kind of multiple. It's going to do one event at a time, and once it's done, is you can at that point be able to freeze a different element. The render in place functionality is going to be a little different. So we'll go ahead and show the render in place. So this would allow you to take multiple tracks simultaneously. Just load up a project with a bunch of samples here. All right. So if I have, sometimes as features are implemented, there's different approaches, and I think our engineers sometimes, it could be tough to, say, oh, everything's going to happen this way from now on. Because people get used to particular workflows. So here, if I wanted to do a quick render in place, I could now just kind of select, let's say, just multiple events here. And let me just select, so I have events on 3 different tracks. So then if I just right click and say render in place, I could select multiple tracks here. I'm just going to render with current settings. And what this will do is you could do multiple tracks this way. So it's not freezing it, but some of the advantages of this are that, one, it's going to be able to do multiple tracks, and it leaves the original tracks intact as well. So if you needed to actually kind of tweak the original MIDI data, you could still have those parts completely intact as well. So if you want to do multiple parts at once, there isn't a way to do multiple freeze, but you really kind of get the same benefits for doing selecting multiple events or multiple tracks. Now, one thing to be aware of is that if you select an event and you go to your render in place, you go to your render settings. At this point, you could mute the source track or keep the source track unchanged. So a lot of times by default it goes to mute so that it doesn't play back like a virtual instrument track and then play back the resulting audio from it, playing, basically having it play twice. Now, if you just have the channel, like the entire track selected and no events on a project window selected, and you go to do your render in place, you get additional options here where you could actually disable the source tracks, or you could remove the source tracks entirely. So if you wanted to take just like, a part and just remove the original tracks and just have kind of the rendered file, you could just select the track as opposed to an individual event on the project window. All right, so let me circle back and go through some more. Okay, so we have a quick question on, can we talk about using Move to Origin on audio clips when working on audio outside of Cubase with programs like Revoice Pro? So I haven't worked with Revoice Pro, but let's say if I just do a new project here. and I'll just give it a audio. We'll create an audio track here. So now at this point, let's say I just record some of my audio. We'll zoom out here. And let's say I'll just go ahead and record a second part. Now, one of the things that Cubase does by default is to record a timestamp position of the audio itself. So, and when you kind of exchange audio files from different programs, so let's say if I move this file here and I want it to be in the same exact position, I could actually select these if I did everything correctly, and then from your move to, so we just kind of come right here, right click and move to origin, and then you could see that these would automatically be placed in the exact time position. So if I had inadvertently moved one of the files in time and I wanted to go back at that point, and many programs now will timestamp files, and this is how people easily exchange. So if I select both those events and go to move to origin, at that point they're automatically going to be placed at their timestamp position. Now the timestamp position you could actually view directly if you wanted to even go into your pool window, and we'll open up our audio, and then if you kind of just probably see it here. So I think in the info, so let me just go to our attributes, and then here you could actually see kind of the, within the origin time. At that point, you could just, let me just uncheck a couple of things. So here at the origin time, we could actually see the exact timestamp of the actual audio file there. So probably when you're moving it to another program for processing, and then you wanted to move it back into Cubase, just simply, if you want that audio file to be at the correct timestamp or the correct time position, its original time, just select the events and move to origin, and then it's going to be placed back directly at its actual sample position. All right, let me go through some of the other questions. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to save a complete signal flow? Like I have all my drums from Groove Agent 4 to their own outs, and I have 2 drum bus and 3 sends. Is there a way to recall that in a new project? Okay, so I think there's a couple ways we could do this. So I'm going to start off with just undo some of my functions. So let's say I wanted to now have, we'll do Groove Agent SE. All right, let me just find. Okay, so let's say I'll just kind of come here. Just okay, so we have this loaded up, and let's say if I have these, and if you wanted to do busing, so I'm going to come here. Let's say I wanted to have a couple of outputs. Let's add an effects. We'll add a couple of effects channel tracks here. So let's say, okay. Sorry for my brain cramp. All right, so say we have 2 effects ends, and then we're going to have a group as well. So I'm going to add 2 group channels. Okay, so let's say we now just kind of play around a little bit here, and okay, so now what I want to do is we'll go to our mixer, and then I'll say, okay, I want my snare to go out of output 2, or say I'll take my kick out of output 2, my snare out of output 3. So when I go to open up my mixer now, I have my outputs here, so my kick and snare isolated here. All right, and let's say if I wanted to go to my routing and I wanted to send these to group 2. So now see our group, and we'll go to our effect sends. I just wanted to go to our effect send here, and on this we just want to have a reverb. So we get to our sends, and let's say, okay. Okay, so we have some tracks that are being routed. So I think that what we can do, if you wanted to store this, and let me just get to the actual instrument track here. I'll just. So what I want to do now is, I think we can actually save this as a track preset, or we could do it as an archive. Let's try a track preset. So I'm going to come directly here, say save track preset. We'll call drum April. So now, I'm not sure if all this is going to carry over, so let's add effects channel using the so let's go to April. Okay, so that didn't carry over all that we thought, so I'm going to remove this. I think we could do a track archive. So we select all these, and then we could export selected tracks. We'll call drum April. All right, so now I will remove these tracks here. And then we could import, and it's called a track archive. We'll give this a try. So let's try drum April. We'll do all those tracks. And when we come here, we'll just check our mixing, and you can see that our routing and our effects channel have all been preserved. So what you want to do is just simply to select all the different tracks, and at that point you want to export selected tracks. And it's a little odd because it's kind of a different name. So you export selected tracks, and then you go to import the track archive, and then all the routing will be preserved for your effects, as well as your groups and your multi outputs are all kind of preserved within that. So try the track archive, and I think that'll do the function for being able to kind of call up that preset again in later songs. We had a question that was mailed in, and since we're kind of in Groove Agent area here, we can now just say, okay, I want to take my Groove Agent part and let's say we'll just do a full instance of Groove Agent, and someone wanted to kind of make a best of kit. And you could do this in the full Groove Agent version, which comes with not only like a lot more content for different kits over the SE or Starter Edition, but also comes with the incredible virtual percussionist. But if you wanted to copy different drum pads, now this works with the beat agent. It's not going to work with the acoustic agent or the percussion agent. Those kits are kind of set and fixed. So if I wanted to come here, let's say if I have a beat agent kit, so I'll just kind of pick okay, so now, and I have this on another, let's say completely different, on my second agent, where we have a different kit. So if you wanted to kind of, make a hybrid of the kits quickly, you could just right click on the pad and say copy pad and say paste pad. So now that's our third agent, and let's say we want that element there and say, okay, I want to copy this pad, go to agent 3, and then you can paste the pad. So now you can, and so you could have all your samples. Now, if you have other drum samples, so let's say if I wanted to import tracks, let's say I have some drum tracks from a different project. So I want to import tracks from a different project here. Let me just find, and we could define those particular tracks. So I'm going to select the project here. And then if I have drum tracks, let's say I don't need my guitar marker track, and I just want to import these tracks. Now, if you have audio from, that you've rendered out, which is easy enough to do with like the, track archives, or if you wanted to just do a render in place, so let's say if I have a multi-track drum part here, I could at this point just select just a sample from one of the kits here, and you could just use like even just a range selection tool without even having to cut, and then you could just drag directly onto a pad as well. Now if you have, let's say, 3 drums that are layered here, like 3 different microphones, at this point you could just select these 3 different elements here. So I'm just going to grab my range selection tool for those 3 different tracks. So say there's 3 different kick mics, and then you could drag these directly onto a pad. So now if you wanted to just come here, you could also, when you go to edit, at this point you could say I just want to layer those 3 samples, and you could choose like different start and ending points for that. So if you have different samples from different beat agent kits, you can just drag and drop and paste from one agent directly to another agent, but not with kind of the acoustic agent or drum agent. But if you wanted to use those individual sounds, you could render it, drag it to the project window, and then drag from the project window onto onto a beat agent. So you can make your own kits that way. So, all right, let me look through some other questions. Is everyone learning a couple things? So I see a question. Is there any capability for vertical zoom using the mouse wheel? So if you kind of just if you hold down the control key, you can kind of zoom that way. And then let me just take a quick look, like for a preference. But if you just kind of hold down, you know, and let me just try. So we just saw his question. So if with the zoom tool, you could also just kind of select, and while holding down the control key, or if you wanted to kind of zoom all of your tracks. So if you wanted to hold down a control key and zoom in that particular range, you could do that with the zoom tool and the modifier key. All right, so I'm going to circle back and look through some of the other questions that may have come in. Give me just a second. So you see a question from Greg. Is there a way to edit drum maps outside of Cubase with a text/XML editor? I find that the need for many drum maps, East-West, DTX 900, TuneTrack, DTX to Groove Agent 4, etc. I don't know of a way to do it through an external tool other than kind of just kind of doing it inside of Cubase, but I'll look into it and see if there's some way of doing it. I can play around with it. All right, so let me just circle back with some questions that have come in. All right, so we have a question from Mark. Sorry, hit the headphone. Okay, it says, "Hi Greg, please how to set up external synthesizer in order to use synthesizer sounds in Cubase as any other VST instrument. What has to be set in the synthesizer as well?" There's really not much that has to be set in the synthesizer itself. Some instruments, you know, like the Yamaha stuff, I believe the Korg stuff is, you know, starting to come with like external VST editors, so you can have like a really kind of like a software experience. But one of the things gets to be kind of routing the particular audio, and some of the keyboards obviously will pass the audio over like a USB connection, but you know, it's not very practical if you're not using that as your main audio interface. So it doesn't do a lot of good for people. But if you wanted to treat like your external instrument like a synthesizer, what we can do is just simply come here. We go to our VST connections. So we could just come here and we have external effects and external synths. So let's say, you know, you have a Prophet 5 or a Phantom or a Kronos or, you know, a Yamaha Reface or whatever. So what you want to do is and we'll just start this from scratch here. So let's say you got you know, Yamaha keyboard, say, you know, you got the first montage available. At this point you just click on add external effects instrument, and this could be anything, so we'll just call it like a motif. And then you're going to say, okay, how many audio outputs do you have? And basically what you want to do is to connect the audio outs of your instrument directly to an input on your audio interface. So we could just say, okay, this is connected onto my UR44 and inputs 3 and 4. Okay, so now when I go to load up an instrument, I can say, okay, I wanted to access that. And what you need to do is just say, okay, I want to go to no VST instrument, or say we go here to our VST instrument and we see external plugins. And now I could just say motif, and then all the routing will be, you can send the MIDI to that track. And at that point, all of the audio will go directly back into your audio interface, so that when you call up the project later, you could still run it through all of your normal computer plugins and have complete access to that. Now, a lot of the instruments, you could also associate a like a software editor with that. So I know like with the Yamaha stuff, a lot of that is set up so that you could then treat your motif just like a VST instrument, but it's not taking any of the CPU horsepower, but you could edit everything graphically on a computer screen, which is really handy. Okay, so your question that came up here, how do I cut up an audio drum loop that has 5 variations of a groove on one track? I had difficulty matching tempo with song. Loops were not separate audio files. Does Wavelab 9 help? You could do some of that in Wavelab 9, but let me just jump to a project where I have a loop here. Let's see if this one has the file I'm thinking of. Okay, so let's say I have a drum loop here. Now, there's a couple things that you could do, especially kind of using it in conjunction with with something like Groove Agent SE. So let me just mute a couple of events here. Okay, so let's say I have a generic sounding drum loop. All right, now if you wanted to do, I may go a little off topic in this, but just to show something interesting. So let's say if I have that drum loop, and let's say it's like very recognizable, or you kind of like it, but you want to change it up a little bit, I could take that kind of generic sounding drum loop, and what I could do is I'm just going to go to like a instance of Groove Agent SE, and this is again the included one. There's even kind of more functionality within the full version of Groove Agent, but I could just drag this loop. Just open this up here. Oh, sorry. Yeah. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to drag this drum loop directly onto one of the instrument pads. Let me just slide this over just a little bit. Usually it stays on top. Not cooperating today. All right. So now that I have this drum loop, we could then just kind of choose to slice the drum loop. So if I come here, we could click on go to Instrument to edit, and then we'll see Slice. And then you click on Create Slices. And what that has done is automatically mapped each slice directly to its own pad. And what that has also done is it's created a MIDI file as a pattern here. So I could drag that pattern directly onto one of the pads here. So I'll just say, okay, we're going to start this at measure 4. And as we play this back, what it's going to do is it's going to basically just trigger those individual sounds. So we'll go back to our instrument. So we hear kind of our original drum loop. And then I think I probably have this one muted. Let me just See if it's not going to the. I sent it to the wrong groove agent here. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, so I think this will make sense now. Sorry about that. Sent it multiple instances of groove agent. So what we've done is taken this. So we've now kind of just created a MIDI file that is the event. Now this MIDI file can automatically synchronize to tempo. And if I wanted to create variations, I'll just kind of drag here from the center edge and we'll copy that. Is now you can just select, and now I could just say, okay, let's just and then if I wanted to, you know, select a function for this one where we reverse all the notes, so we could just kind of go to MIDI functions and say reverse. So now you could have different variations. Kind of with the same groove and same sounds. So, but if you have a stereo 2-track, what you could actually, and let's say, you know, you have, and these are all kind of different variations, is you could actually just kind of select the range here. And then if you go to the audio menu, you could just choose to so I think we could probably do it from audio here to bounce selection. And then that will, you could replace that file, drag that in, and at that point you could have everything just kind of triggered from different MIDI notes if you slice it in that same manner. So I think, I hope that answers your question. If not, just kind of leave a comment. But that way the MIDI can automatically kind of follow in to whatever tempo you have. So even if there is tempo variations, you could just kind of quantize the MIDI quite easily. All right, so I'm going to cycle through some of the questions that were sent in. And again, if that doesn't, for Scott, if that doesn't answer your question or you want to do something else, just let me know. So I see a question when I exported before, I got an empty clip back. It's just I didn't have the right bus selected when I did the export. So. Okay, so we had this question about rendering in place for MIDI for something like Groove Agent. So let me just okay, so one of the things that you could do, if there's a couple ways that you could approach to do if you wanted to render out a particular instrument. Like let's say if I have a loop here, let me just get this set up so you can hear it a little better. All right, sorry about that. All right, so let's say I have my instance of Groove Agent here, and then I want to go to my instrument. So here again, we could just kind of choose, let's say, this, and then at that point we could just choose to have it go out of our different outputs. And kind of like what we could do is just say, okay, I wanted to take just that kick, and then if you wanted to go to And there's several different ways to do this, but one of them is you could just do a batch export and say, okay, I just wanted to take, I'll just do this with a brand new one since I have like a bunch of different instruments loaded up here, just so it's easier to follow. So I'll do a new project. So if you want a quick, easy mono kick out, and again, I could do it from a track instrument or so just load up a quick pattern here. Gotta go to my patterns here. Turns down a little bit. Okay, I'll just type in new tempo. All right, so now we're just gonna drag this out to our just get a pattern that has multiple parts in it. Okay, so now I'm going to just come here. So we have, let's say we wanted a mono kick. All right, so we have two different kicks, but if I wanted to, I could actually just say we want these to go out of output 2. I'll take both of the kicks, or I could do them individually. I want to make sure that we have output 2 active. And then when you go to your export audio mixdown, we just want it output 2. And then we could mono down mix. And then we want to import it to an audio track. And then you have your mono file. Just like that. So once you kind of get the hang of it, it's, you know, it's an easy way of just being able to kind of quickly export individual elements with your batch export, because you could do that on, when you go to your channel batch export, at this point you could just simply, so you get to your export audio mixdown, and again, activate batch export, then you could have each of your outputs that are active, and they could all be summed down to mono very quickly. All right, so go through some of the topics that people have asked here. Okay, so we see a question. Quick question. I can't change the colors for multiple selected tracks. Is it a bug, or is there no such option in Cubase? I think I was doing it at some point, but it's not working. All right, so I kind of was late to the table on this feature as well. I complained about it to our developers for a long time, and now I kind of feel stupid that I missed something really obvious. So let's say I have 14 tracks of audio, and I'll just kind of select these tracks here. So I'm going to just select all of these tracks. And now if you grab the color tool, you can now just colorize all your tracks. So if you wanted to record, at that point, we can just, using the color wheel, you can just select your different colors of your tracks directly there for multiply selected tracks. So I was kind of doing it. You could do it individually if you wanted to, from here, where it would do it for like one selected track, and that doesn't work multiply. But if you have multiple tracks selected, just using the color tool here and then selecting the color will change them all. So as you record, all those parts would then be that selected color. So All right, so let me cycle back through comments here. We had a bunch of ones that were sent in that we're going to get through as well, but we'll go through some of the live comments here. All right. Is render in place like consolidate in Pro Tools? I'm not that familiar with Pro Tools, but I think it's kind of the same idea. So I see a question. Can I install the software on a second computer? I'll be replacing my current machine soon. Yes, you can install it on however many computers you want, and the license is actually just stored on your USB-E licenser. So you just move your USB-E licenser, and you don't have to do any registration or anything like that because the license is just stored there. So you can freely install it anywhere if you want. Okay, so I'm seeing a question on what is the status of the MIDI device manager. It really hasn't had any love since SX3. That's correct. You know, one of the reasons we did it is because previous versions, going back to I think Atari version 1.5 or 2, at least in 2, I know, and like 24 years ago or 25 years ago, had things called mixer maps where you could make those devices. So people can still make your own kind of software editors, but a lot of people are kind of doing everything kind of in the box or doing it through kind of software, you know, specific software editors, what like Yamaha and some other companies are doing. So I think it hasn't had a lot of attention. You're correct with that. All right, so going through. Okay, so let me just, all right, so we see Claudius from Montreal, so I'm just cycling back, reading through. Okay, so pitch bend automation. So we'll get to that in just a second. We'll tie that in. Okay, we had a question, question on kind of using quick controls and being able to use quick controls in like VST instrument controls and how to get that set up. And we had another question in the feed about using kind of different, you know, using different tools that you may have, like I think it was an Arturia controller, and using that to control different parts in Cubase. So I have just kind of a generic old MIDI Man Oxygen here, but you could do the same thing with any controller, like a Nectar or an Akai. But so let's go ahead and get this set up. So I'll just kind of come here. We'll activate this project. I'm just going to revert it here. And we'll kind of take this whole thing from scratch. Now, a lot of times what we have is the ability to, you know, there's a really handy function called quick controls. You realize that a lot of times you may not need to have access to, you know, 16, you know, you can open up a plugin sometimes and, you know, there's a lot of options available. And having a plugin actually function for, you know, doing, you know, trying to mimic a hardware controller for all the parameters for every single plugin could be a little mind-numbing and a bit impractical. So we have some technology called quick controls, and this gives you kind of 8 kind of go-to controllers, and we could see this in instruments, and we see this in our instrument rack here. So I'll just go ahead and we'll load up, let's say, an instance of Retrolog here. Okay, so let's say we have an instance of Retrolog, and we do this, we see these kind of 8 go-to parameters here on Retrolog. So if I wanted to, we'll go through a couple presets here. So if I wanted to play. Now, so we see these, and a lot of times you see MIDI controllers that have like 8 knobs. So it